And now, the only survival show to survive making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. In this episode, we make it rain information on rainwater collection, purification, and sanitation with Trenton Kaminski. And we're joined by chemist Mark Vorderbruggen to give us the technicals on purification and sanitation. Get ready for a big episode with bonus downloads and a metric shit ton of awesome survival information. Howdy, and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode 142. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Three quick notes you need to know before we dive into the show today. First, this episode features two guests, so make sure you listen all the way through today. When I say goodbye to one guest, I'll say hello to the next. Second, this episode took a full month to pull together and make. Plus, editing alone took 10 hours. When it was all done, I had an idea. Would the roving horde like a transcript of all this? So I spent some money and had the whole episode transcribed for y'all. You can get your free copy at www.intherabbithole.com/E142. Plus, Dr. Mark Vorderbruggen, also known as Merriweather, put together a very special spreadsheet you'll hear about towards the end of this episode. I'll include that in the download too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy your Ph.D. in water. And be sure to get your free copies of all the goodies associated with this episode. And last but not least, help us keep the lights on. Support the ITRH show and mission by becoming part of the Roving Horde Armada. You can learn more at itrh.net about all the great benefits membership gets you. Things like encrypted forums to connect with like-minded people, access to every episode ever produced by ITRH, including a special one that was never aired. Listen to episodes the night before they air publicly. Get a free copy of the book, Owning Your Survival. Get access to a 1-hour emergency kits for bugging out and bugging in class with special downloads. And that's just to name a few. Again, visit itrh.net for more details now. We're counting on supporting members just like you to help us keep the lights on. And now, let's start with our first guest. Trenton, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole, man.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
I am doing excellent, and I've got to say, I am really looking forward to this interview today because I know rainwater collection and perhaps the rainwater treatment and how that's handled is such a huge topic, whether you're interested in sustainability or preparedness. And as we were talking about before we really started recording today, those two things overlap and those two communities overlap in such a huge way. Now, you've gone out and built a really extensive rainwater system that I think would be the envy of almost anyone, whether they're just into sustainability or whether they're into preparedness and study sustainability from a preparedness perspective. What got you into this?
Well, the story, it goes back, I would say, a couple of years at least, and it really didn't start with rainwater. I never knew that I wanted to build a rainwater harvesting system. The biggest thing was how it all got started was really talking about GMOs on my friend's The Pursuit podcast. And from that, actually it was from that podcast that I was like, you know what, I'm going to build a greenhouse. And I actually have a full greenhouse in the backyard now. And I started with aquaponics set up. So a lot of your listeners may know, but aquaponics is where you raise fish and plants at the same time and you use the fish poop as your fertilizer. But I was such a rookie at that I switched to hydroponics because I would mess up so often that it would take my system a long time to regenerate the nutrients. But in that, I learned that I couldn't use the city water, that my plants weren't growing that well, and that I needed rainwater. And it was only then that I decided, okay, I'm going to build a rainwater harvesting system to get the good water. Couple reasons where my pHs were way too high. The pH is basically the acidity or alkalinity of water, and plants like a specific pH. In short, the water I was getting from the city was just not doable, wasn't good. And I originally started with these like 30, 40 gallon like plastic barrels I got from where I grew up in Needville. It's 30 minutes south of Houston. And so grew up on a farm there, and we had a bunch of extra barrels. But I quickly found out that that's not going to be enough water. And actually, just a couple neighbors down from me, they had the big IBC tanks. These are 275-gallon tanks that are in a cage, or it looks like a cage that they're in. They can be picked up on a forklift and moved around. A lot of like hotels and restaurant chains may get them for like soap or cooking oil. So you can find these food grade totes. And the wonderful thing about them is they're universal to the world. That's what really, really made me want to use these, because right now people are contacting me from all over the world building the same system, because these tanks are available to the regular person in their local community, and you can buy them used and cheap. And so that's what was very attractive about building that rainwater system. So that's how it kind of led up to building that system, and then the lead up to figure out, well, what am I going to build? I didn't know anything really about rainwater harvesting when I started. I just started researching and YouTubing and just finding out as much information as I could. And on the videos, you could see where I start with just 2 tanks, and then I upgrade to 4 tanks. And then there was a lot of little issues when building the system. Just something very simple is like just the adapters for the bottom threads. They're all different. And so just doing all the research to find out, where do you purchase these and what are these threads called, just to know the names of the part. A lot of times it's like your biggest hurdle, because you don't even know what to search.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew, like, when doing this, like, I'm not the only one that wants to know this. It's like that if I put this out, I really feel that people will watch this, and they'll want to, I believe a lot of people, they want to do good for themselves, and they want to sustain themselves. It doesn't mean we all practice that, but I just knew I should put this on the internet. I should record this and put this out there. I really don't know. I really can't put into words why. I just knew I should. Mm-hmm. And it's been pretty awesome. I've done it very slowly, just maybe a video a month, until recently I started putting up more. And to me, it's awesome seeing people respond and talk to me and say, thanks, this has really helped. And I was like, wow, I mean, I never realized the impact that it could have. And now I get the email from you guys, and actually you guys are local too. So it's just really cool how all the connections are coming together.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Now, and you've brought up an interesting point here about how yours is expanded. And I know it is kind of staggering how much water the average U.S. household uses, or I mean, almost around the world. It doesn't matter where we are, how much water we use. How many of your water needs have you ended up being able to take off, say, city water and start using your rainwater system instead?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I say in my videos that I've built an entire system that can run a home. However, I don't run my home off of my rainwater system. What I do is I use all my rainwater for my garden, and I also use it to brew kombucha. People don't know what kombucha is. Kombucha is a probiotic drink. It's a food product, so it's very good for your digestive system and for your immune system. The easiest way I can explain, what is a probiotic? It's the opposite of an antibiotic. An antibiotic, when we go to the doctor, that's what we get, and they give that to us, and it kills everything. It kills all the good and the bad. A probiotic is the opposite. It just enhances all the good properties and boost up your immune system. So this is a company that I started brewing kombucha, and I didn't want to use the city water because it's chemically treated to kill the bacteria. So if I put this in my kombucha, all it would do is kill my drink right away. So I wanted to start with water that had nothing in it. I didn't even know that I was going to do kombucha, and that all just came to be later. I originally just started off from my garden and had the tanks for my garden, the water unfiltered. I built all the filtration to do that, and then eventually one day, yes, I do want to hook up the system to run the entire home. But like you mentioned earlier, our home, we don't really realize how much water we use. And I have 1,100 gallons capacity, but realistically, an average American home would use that in probably a week. And so you really need like 4 to 5,000 gallons of capacity to run a regular home. And on top of that, you probably need a gray water system where you reuse some of your water. Like you can reuse your shower water for your toilet water, and that really saves on using all. You don't need basically you don't need potable water to use the restroom in. You can use already used water, and then filter it a little bit before you put it in the toilet. So that's kind of where I am right now on my system.
So now, how long did this system take you to develop to the point where you have it now, where you have this really extensive filtration and sanitization, is that even a word, system, which we'll come to in just a bit. But how long did it take you to get all of that together?
Well, overall, I would say probably a year, but it wouldn't take like it wouldn't take you a year if you wanted to do it. The reason why it took me a year is because I didn't know I was going to be doing it. Like I started just with the rainwater, and I never knew that I was going to be purifying the water. So that just came later, like 6 months later. Like as I'm growing my food and doing more things, and being an entrepreneur, I was looking for a new business to get into and something that I was passionate about because I've done things before only for the money, and in the end, like you end up more empty than you did in the beginning because I guess we think money can bring us happiness, but really what brings us happiness is the connection with people and relationships and things you build that won't leave when you leave. And so, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, money is always, it's interesting if you really follow what you love and what you're passionate about, and it's something that really does bring a benefit to other people. Then I've always found like money is kind of the really wonderful byproduct that allows you to do even more. So it's kind of one of those things. I mean, people say follow your passion, follow your bliss. But it is true. If you do it and do it right, it's so much better than the trap that people get into where they're chasing a dollar and end up becoming a slave to that dollar rather than the dollar being a happy byproduct of what they've achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we've all kind of lived that in our own way.
Yeah, I'm sure we have. So now if somebody wanted to go out and do this tomorrow, how long would it take them?
I think if you went out and just watched my videos, like I would say watch them all first so you get an idea of what you're going to do, and then you might adjust it to your setup. I really think like you could go out and you could do the rainwater harvesting part. You could easily do that in a weekend with just a friend's help, because a lot of it's going to be locating your parts, where you're going to get your tanks from locally, and is someone going to deliver them to you, or are you going to go pick them up, ordering your adapters if you need them, and just going to Lowe's or Home Depot or local hardware store and buying the PVC pipe and the glue that you need. It's all really simple, not that complicated. It's just going to take you a little bit of time, but easily you could set it up over the weekend. And then the water purification, if you had all the parts, I mean, we could build it. If you watch the videos, you could probably build it in a few hours. That's the one thing I haven't done yet, is like a how-to series on how to build that water purification board that purifies all the water. That's what I hope to do in the future. But I feel like I talked enough about it and explained enough about it. Like if you're handy at all, like if you're a do-it-yourselfer at all, you're going to be able to build it. You're going to be able to look at it and be able to build it. Like, so the biggest thing is a lot of times finding out, like, where do I buy these parts and what is the name of the parts?
Yeah.
So I give that out. I put the links on the bottom of on all my video descriptions, because I know I went through it. And like, that was the most difficult part for me. The putting it together is really easy. It's just pointing out where it's all at.
Yeah. Have you figured out, just out of curiosity, have you figured out what the system you have now has cost you so far?
The water purification only, not my rain tanks at all. Well, let's just do this. Let's start with the rain tanks, because the water comes in there. You can get the used IBC tote tanks for like $70 to $100. At least here in Houston, you can. If you pay that higher end, $100, you should be able to get them delivered to your home.
Yeah, that's what we ended up doing.
All around town, you can get them for that price. I wouldn't pay more than that. And that's really cheap compared to a normal rain tank, which is about $1 a gallon. And what I mean by that is, if you bought a 1,000-gallon tank, it would be $1,000, and plus your delivery fee. But on these tanks, they're 275 gallons, and they're only $100. So that's like 30 cents a gallon or 33 cents a gallon. It's a lot cheaper to buy these used tanks. And then you have some center blocks and then just some PVC piping. So I have 4 tanks. That's what, $280 to $400, depending on if you're paying 70 or $100. Then you're wrapping them with black plastic, which is like $12 a piece. So you can set yourself up a rain system from anywhere from like $150 to $700, like the one I have, depending if you want to put 1 tank or you want to put 4 tanks. That's including all your adapters and your center blocks. You'll be in it at the max, probably $700 at the very max.
And that's actually not that bad, especially if you look at, like you were saying, I know there is a place here in town that sells the really big water tanks that hold like 1,000 gallons and stuff like that. And those tanks, brand new, which is how you have to buy them, are pretty expensive. And that's not even counting the metal ones, because I know there's a place in town that does essentially true cisterns, and they'll come out and install it and do the gutter hookup and everything for you. And then you're getting into like thousands of dollars, and it gets pretty crazy pretty fast.
Yeah, definitely. If you're not doing it yourself and you're paying someone to do it, it can start to add up if you want to get a complete water system. It's not, I mean, just like if you're going to do an electric system, you're creating its own sustainable system. So it's going to cost a little bit of money and time.
Yeah, definitely. So would you consider this, what you built, a 1-person or a 2-person job?
It can be done with 1 person, but you should do it with 2 people, just for the fact that like those tanks are so big. It's just, they're not real heavy. I can drag them around. I can flip them over, but I can't pick them up over the fence. Like they wouldn't fit through my gate. Yeah. So we had to pick them up over the fence, which takes 2 guys. So I would do it with 2 people. It's going to save you do it with 2 people to go 3 times quicker.
Yeah.
So I recommend 2 people. However, if it's only you, by all means, go for it though. Still, if you're the only person, it's not that you can't do it. It'll just take a little longer.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is they, like you were saying, they're so bulky, because at some point you do have to stack them on top of each other. And that is a point, like I was able to move them around and do everything else with them. And even like when I had them stacked, I was able to get them off of each other to work on them a little bit, but to get them back on top of each other was like, I definitely needed somebody else's help with that. Mainly just because of the bulk and the size of them. Unless you have like an incredible arm reach or something.
Yeah. It's just too much. They're just too big.
So going into the IBC totes themselves, you brought up an interesting point in your videos about making sure you're getting the right kind and using the ones that hadn't been used to transport chemicals. How do you tell what an IBC was actually used for in its previous life, so that you get one that was to transport detergents or something like that, and not one that was used to transport some sort of toxic chemical?
There's really no way you're going to know 100% for sure unless you know where it was delivered, what was in it, who used it, and then they sold it to you. But you can question the people you're buying them from and see if you trust them. Ask them enough questions to see if you think they're lying to you. If you think they're lying, I wouldn't trust that IBC tote and that what they said was in there. And another thing is look in it and smell it and see. Ask them if they've cleaned it out before too. Because if they said they've cleaned it and then there's something in there, they obviously did not clean it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you're just gonna have to like use your intuition and use good questioning for you to determine if those people are telling you the truth. Also, there might be some stickers or signage on the cage itself saying what was in there, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have switched a tank. So these are all things that you could look for to help ensure that what these people are telling you is true. But the main thing is, if you don't feel comfortable with, and you're asking these people, is this a food grade tote? Was it used for food grade stuff? And they're just quickly saying yes, or just one word answers to your questions, and you're wanting a little bit more detail, just look elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Unless, depending on what you're going to use it for, if you're drinking the water, of course, you're going to want to make sure you get a food grade tote. But if you're using it just for your garden, most totes, like I wouldn't say totes that have motor oil in, it's going to be hard to get that motor oil out of there. But if there was something in the tote that, let's say, toxic or harmful, but not necessarily what you wanted in there, you don't want to be drinking that water. If you rinse that tote out really good, clean it really good with some soap too, you could use it to irrigate your yard or irrigate. I would say if you're at all iffy, don't irrigate an edible plant, right? But you can
Hmm.
irrigate your trees or your yard with it. You can get those IBC totes for $40 if they've had other things in there like non-desirable items that aren't food grade. They come much cheaper, but I wouldn't do that unless it's like, well, like I said, I just want to water my yard.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't even know that there was that price difference on them. We sought out food grade, and I'm pretty sure they were food grade. We did the whole sniff test and all that stuff. Like high school chemistry class, we were over there
Yeah.
like wafting and like, don't stick your nose directly into it. And you brought up an interesting point of you had a video on how you cleaned them out. And it seemed like a pretty simple process. You took them out of the cage and then you just put some soap in and tumbled them through the yard. I mean, it's not an extensive thing, but can you kind of walk us through that and how well you were actually able to get yours cleaned out?
Oh, yeah, mine came pretty clean already. There really wasn't much in there, but I just wanted to make sure without a doubt that I cleaned the entire tank, and I sprayed it out with a water hose really good, and I used Dawn soap. And if you had a power washer, that would work great. Like with this, you could really get in there and do some damage with a power washer. I just didn't have one with me at
Yeah.
the time. And the reason why I chose to flip them like that is because I'd get all sides, the top, the bottom, everything. I knew that I was cleaning the whole tank out. Whereas when I'm in there spraying with the water hose, I don't know if I'm getting the top part. Like I put my hand in and I try to turn the water hose up. You don't know that you're spraying,
Mm-hmm.
where the cap is, that top part. So I just felt like, that'd be the easiest way. Just sit there and tumble them through the yard until I felt like they were clean.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to work just fine. Once the rain filled them up a few times too, and I used that water, like I didn't have any issue with any of the plants or the grass or anything. Like everything seemed great as far as being concerned with any contaminants in the water. I never felt like I had any issue or that there was anything left after I cleaned them. They smelled good.
Now, did you end up having the water tested at any point?
Tested for bacteria, E. coli, and total coliform.
Mm-hmm.
I did. And so here's what's interesting. I would assume, and I'm not positive, but I would assume has both E. coli and total. It will test positive for E. coli and total coliform because I tested my water before and my water after I filtered. And before I filtered it, it had both in there. So like if a bird craps on your roof and then that goes in your gutter, then that sits in your tank, that's E. coli.
Mm-hmm.
As I know it, total coliform is just a bunch of other bacteria that have a bunch of names that I don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
But I sent it to City of Houston Laboratory. They do it for like $8 or $10. And then I made sure that my filtration was working as well. And so I was actually happy to see that it had bacteria in it prior to know that my filters cleaned it out.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I'm glad to know about the City of Houston. There's a thing in the prepper community, and it's mostly been dispelled, but nobody's really tested. There was kind of an old urban legend that you couldn't store water on concrete for some reason. And I was trying to find real research on anyone that had dispelled that myth, and I never could. And then I finally remembered, wait a minute, I have a 50-gallon plastic water drum sitting in my garage that's been sitting on concrete for about 15 years, and I have the water saved, and I keep wanting to send it off and having tested. So that's great to know that. Now, going back to the water quality, I know the IBC totes are translucent, and so that allows them to enough sunlight in that you end up creating basically an algae farm inside that tank if you don't either treat it or cover it up. And you talked a little bit about the plastic earlier. Why plastic instead of, say, paint or something like that?
I think really it's just a personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
Both are going to work. The main thing is to block the sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Which way you go about it is up to you. I chose plastic because it wasn't messy. It was a lot easier. I felt like that I would scratch the paint off if I ever moved the tanks around. I don't plan on moving them around.
Mm-hmm.
Also getting the specific type of paint that I would have needed in the prep work to do on the tank. Like if you're going to paint something correctly and you want it to last a long time, you should rough up the edges a little bit, probably prime it, then paint it. It just seemed like a lot of work just to block the sunlight, and that I could just wrap it in this plastic and be done, and it wouldn't take that long.
Yeah. And you have to make sure you get the right kind of paint that sticks to the plastic and doesn't chip and peel up. And
there's a lot of research.
Yeah.
Then if I did all that and I made a video, who's going to want to go do all that, get messy, buy the equipment? So a lot of it is also the thinking of like, can other people do this themselves as well? Can they watch this and be like, I can do that? And so actually since then, I just found an IBC tote tank cover that just slips right over the whole cage and covers it up.
Really?
So it's actually a guy from Austin. They're 50 to $60 depending on how many you buy. If you buy 4, they're $50, but if you buy 1, it's going to be 60.
Hmm.
And I just purchased one. He sent it to me and it looked really good, and I made a quick video over it and sent it to him. And he said it'd look a lot better with all of them on there. So he sent me a few more because I was telling him specifically that I have a YouTube channel that's just over these, like for your product specifically. And so it was great. Like he kind of sponsored me with those covers then to put over the tanks.
Oh, nice.
That video will be going up soon. There's one video up right now, but it only has where one tank is covered.
Mm-hmm.
But now all my tanks are covered and it looks a lot better. You don't see that metal cage. Now knowing this, I would go that route. And I had another guy actually comment on the video, and he was asking me about the prices, and regardless of the prices too, which one would I choose? The way I put it to him was, well, you're going to pay $12 for your wrap that you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to buy the tape for it, and it's going to take your time. Or you can spend the $50, which is $38 more, and it's not going to take you any time just to slide the cover over it, and it's going to look aesthetically, it's going to look much better. There's not going to be any cage. And I told him this, if you're in a relationship, that $38 is going to be worth it. So your wife or girlfriend don't tell you that these tanks look hideous.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one biggest complaint. And I can see my my analytics on my YouTube. 88% of the people that watch my channel are male.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 10 or 12% are female.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I tell all the guys. Look, man, just save yourself time, save yourself the headache, just buy the cover and be done with it. And they do look a lot better, and they're heavy duty. It's like a boat cover. It's like a thick PVC vinyl.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing that video. That's really neat.
In a nice zipper that goes across, so you can have access to the cap and everything as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once you put it on, you can still have access to the tank.
Oh, okay. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing these. Now, you also brought up the point about the connectors, and I know that was a thing. One of the things we didn't realize when we went to buy these tanks was even thinking about the connectors. And you ended up doing a whole video on it, and I went back and went, oh, man. So now, how did you, because that had to have been a lot of research, because even when I was trying to look it up, they're written, anyone who's ever tried to read any kind of engineering documents or anything, it's like, oh my God, I get 3 words into it and want to fall asleep. How did you end up finding the right connectors or figuring out what connectors went to what tank ports and stuff like that, the drain ports that are on the bottom of them?
Yeah, I guess simply, I just found people that knew what they were talking about. Like I would just Google a place to buy a brand new IBC tank, like people that sold them outright, like companies. And then I knew that those companies would have all the proper adapters and everything. So then I would call them and be like, well, man, I got all these tanks. They have different threads, and I would explain the threads to them. Like I know NPT thread, that's the standard US thread, that it's about 10 loops around, like real fine threading. And then there's these other threads on the tank that only have like 3 giant threads, and those are called buttress threads. Well, if I would have just knew that, I could have Googled buttress to NPT adapter, and then it would have just probably popped up. So yeah, just by finding other websites with IBC tote tanks, I would call them and ask them, well, what are the names of these, and do y'all have them for sale? And that's simply how I found out. Then I would just get the link and put it under my video, like here's where to buy them. But I started off with just these typical things you get from Lowe's or Home Depot. There's like rubber collars, and they work and you can use them, but they're not the proper adapter that's going to really last long term for you and not give you any headache. I knew that was it's a small detail, but it's a very important detail. And I knew that I wasn't the people that do watch the video that need it are incredibly thankful for it, but you don't really realize how much of a help it was until you get to that point. Like, oh my God, well, where do I even get these from? I knew that I have to make this because I'm not the only one that this happened to be a giant headache for. You're like, oh, this is great. I got the tank. I got everything I need. Now, how do I connect the bottom to the rest of the pipes? Like, you're just rigging it up whatever do-it-yourself way that you know. And I knew like they have to make these. They don't put threads on these and not make the adapter to go to them. So it's just a matter of finding them, which that's where a lot of us will stop, because it's like, I don't got the time for all this. Like, they just need to make a kit that sells it all, and then I can do it myself.
Yeah.
So that's why some of the biggest things when building the YouTube channel and all is, can and will other people do this if they watch it?
Mm-hmm.
Do they see it as a do-it-yourself solution?
So now, which, if you could have, going back in time, centered on one IBC with one kind of connection, which one would you have gone with?
So they have other size IBC totes, which are 330 gallons. So don't go with those. Go with the 275 gallon. And then go with the ones that have the NPT thread, which you can know that if you go to your local hardware store and you buy a 2-inch threaded adapter of any kind, they're probably only going to have NPT thread. And if they have anything else, you're going to have to look really hard for it, because that's all the standard threads that the United States uses. So everything that you go and buy from the store, that's the threads that are on it.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
It's a 2-inch, valves are 2 inches. So if you went and bought one, when you go check your IBC tote tanks, bring that with you and just make sure it fits on each one that you buy, and pick out those tanks, because if you're not looking specifically at those threads, you are going to get mismatched tanks with different threads on them. And so you don't have to necessarily, like, you can buy those adapters, but then you're just looking at like $7-8 more bucks extra. But that's not that much, especially if you didn't know and you already have the tank. Then you'll just be really happy to know that there is an adapter for it. That's not a deal breaker either, I would say. Like, if they don't have those tanks, just get your adapter and get the tank, and maybe you can negotiate a price break because it's not the tank that you want. Definitely use that as negotiating. Like, well,
but that's interesting, and that's interesting that you can do the MPT threads, and that you can, for the most part, get parts from Home Depot, whereas opposed to the other kinds. That's really interesting and really, really helpful to know for listeners. Let's go on to your really crazy filtration part and your process. And I think here's where we start to get into the kind of crazy stuff that it looks at it as like, oh, wow, this guy really put some effort into these. So let's start with your filtration process. What does that look like? And yeah, just tell us about it, man. It's really quite fascinating.
When I started, I had no clue of how I was going to filter this water. I didn't know much about filtering water at all. But in learning about rainwater harvesting and growing my own food and more sustainability, that's when I came across earthships. And for people, a lot of your listeners may know, but for people that don't know, an earthship is a fully sustainable home or facility. They collect rainwater, they use solar power, they treat their own septic, they grow food, and inside the home there's a greenhouse. It's separate from the home, however, and they reuse a lot of their water with gray water. And the system I built is very similar, but not exactly like the system in the earthship homes and where they filter their rainwater. But what I've done is upgrade my system to be able to handle more water than the typical system you see in those homes. I wanted to be able to filter and purify more water with changing my filters less often. And how you do that is have more filters, because then you can catch more dirt, debris, bacteria particles before you have to change any filter. So when I was looking for that, I only found like one video that had anything like that on the internet at all. And it wasn't built correctly, meaning that like they put their UV filter or UV purifier in the beginning of the system when that's supposed to go at the end of the system. UV is only effective if there's nothing larger than 5 microns in your water, because if it is larger than 5 microns, the bacteria essentially get shade from that particle, and then the UV light won't hit that bacteria because it has shade, and then therefore it won't inactivate it. It'll just be living still because it was able to get shade when going through the UV light. That's something essential. If you're ever putting a UV light on your system, it needs to go last, and you need a filter down to 5 microns before you put anything through it for it to be effective. So after I found this one video, that really helped because I was able to find out some names of the products that I needed. One was a Rusco spin down filter. There's 3 of those in there. And these filters just filter out sediment or particles, starting from the biggest ones down to the smallest ones. And that's just pre-filtering the water down to get ready to go through the actual purifiers. Those have nothing to do with actually making the water pure, only removing hard particles.
Hmm. There's essentially, if I remember correctly, it was 4-stage filtration process before it gets to the UV. So why do you start off with, say, a larger size and then have it work its way down? Why not just have one filter that
Does it all.
does it all? Yeah.
Well, you could if you wanted to. It would be effective in making sure your water has no bacteria, but it wouldn't be efficient because you would have to always clean that one filter because it would clog so quickly because it's catching everything.
Hmm.
And so, actually, now how I have it set up, and I'm about to do some updates. There's 5 pre-filters before I get to the filter that's called a Dalton Rio 2000. It's a ceramic filter,
Hmm.
and after that ceramic filter, your water's pure and ready to drink. You don't have to have that UV light. I really don't recommend it. You don't need it. I do that because I brew my kombucha with that, and I know without a doubt that my water's pure. And that means like my system can fail on many places and still work. So if my UV light goes out, my water's still pure because I have that ceramic filter. If my ceramic filter for any reason broke or went out, my water is still pure because I can move it through my UV light and purify it. I still have enough filtration before that, filtering my water down to 1 micron before it even hits my UV light. So I built my system with it. It's very what is the word for it?
There's a lot of redundancy in that.
Yeah, it's adjustable in the sense that like it's because I double purify it. I have room for it to mess up if I need it to. I use a lot of the water for my business. I don't ever want to not have water. And
Hmm.
so that's why, and because also whenever I use this water, I make a product with it, and then I end up selling that product. I must know that my water's pure,
Hmm.
and I test my water too regularly, just to know without doubt that water is good.
So you're actually up to a 5-stage filtration process now?
It's actually 7 total.
Oh, wow.
So there's 3 Rusco spin down filters first,
Hmm.
and then there's a carbon filter that's a refillable carbon that helps with taste or odor.
Hmm.
Uh, and other like if you had water with any chlorine can absorb some of that, chemicals too if any of that was in there, but I did mine specifically just like let's say earthy taste you would have
Hmm.
in your water at all that would remove it. And then there's a 1 micron bag filter, and then there's the ceramic filter that's actually less than a micron. It's 0.9 microns, and then after that is the UV light.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely overbuilt. That a typical person could just do 3 Rusco spin down filters, and then the Dalton Rio 2000, and that can actually handle your entire home because you don't have to push a lot of water through your Dalton Rio, the one that makes your drinking water. You only need to use that filter for your potable water.
Hmm.
The water that's not potable, there's another outlet that allows you to get the water after the second Rusco spin down filter.
Hmm.
You're not going to see any sediment in there, but there could be bacteria. But if you're going to put that in your toilet, you're about to put bacteria in your toilet when you
Yeah.
use the restroom. So there's no need in filtering that water to be pure. So that will save your filters a lot. It will save you from having to clean a lot of them. That's something I like to stress to people that are looking in this. They think they might have to build what I built, but let me say the UV light part of this system costs just as much as the entire system,
Holy
around
crap.
$800.
Wow.
So you can build the system for 800, and then if you want to add your UV light, you're going to add 800.
Mhm.
So you don't have to have that. If you want it, get it after you already have your system. I only do it because it's for my peace of mind, and it's because I use it to create a product.
Hmm. And a product that, I mean, it's a product that other people are consuming. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you're in business, $800 for the peace of mind, 100% worth it.
hmm.
Very last worst thing you would ever want to do is get someone sick.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to cost you way more than $800 if you got someone sick.
Mhm.
And plus, it's morally right too. I mean, like at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. And if you're cutting corners, you know that you're cutting corners. For me, like I just like to do everything right the first time. But I mean, let me say this too: if I was the only one drinking it, I wouldn't have the UV light.
Walk us through what is the purpose here really of the UV light? And I mean, I realize you're going to real extremes here because it's not just your own personal consumption. You know, as you were talking about second ago, there's the moral obligation of this is a product you're putting out there for other people to consume. So at the end of the day, what is the real purpose here of that UV light?
So there's a couple purposes. One is, like I said earlier, the double purification. For any reason, something came up and I didn't know that my Dalton Rio failed or broke or something happened that's supposed to purify the water, then when it reached my UV light, it would be pure. So it would still be purified. And also, it gives me flexibility in that if something broke, my system still works and purifies water, but I have the ability for part of my system to fail and still have pure water. And so I like that flexibility as well. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is for me just to know without doubt that my water, even though I test my water, the worst thing you would want to do is test your water and it come back negative, that something's wrong. So I really felt like just paying that price up front was, I don't want to have to be worrying about something and then that would slow me down in the long run, that I'm worrying about my most essential part of, I say most essential. I'm not sure if it is the most essential, but it is a very essential part of my business. Like, I need water to create my product. That's just one ingredient of my product. And I even market that I use purified rainwater and that I purify it myself. When you attach your name to something, so you should just be sure that what you're attaching your name to is good and you stand by it. That's the main reason.
Okay.
I just stand by what I built and what I'm selling. And
yeah, no, man, that makes total sense, and that speaks a lot to you as a person, and as an entrepreneur and a business owner that you go to those lengths to protect your name and to protect other people should something go wrong within your system. Now, and speaking of which, if I remember correctly, you ran into some issues when you were first setting up your UV system. What were those issues that you ran into? I think was it a problem with the company that you had dealt with, or there was something that went on with that?
Yeah, definitely had some big issues with the company that I dealt with. This was freshwatersystems.com. That when you go to their website, it looks very reputable. It says they've been around for like 30 years, 20 years. So that kind of sold me at first too. Really not any issues with once I got the product that I wanted, I didn't have any big issues except for that. What I learned is if you have threaded metal parts, a lot of times I've used Teflon tape on like some PVC parts, and this helps prevent like leaking when you turn pressure on. But I needed a putty sealant. I don't know the exact name, but it's like this putty you can put on the threads, and once it dries, it creates a better seal. That's the only issue that I ran into that I haven't faced before. I thought the Teflon tape was going to be good enough, and it wasn't. So then I took it back apart and had to put the putty on it. But other than that, as far as the only other issues was just the headache with the company. The first product I ordered came with a broken bulb. Then at that point, I decided to upgrade the system. That actually comes with the monitor that tells me the brightness or the luminosity of my UV light, how many hours it's been running, how much life is left in it. So I upgraded to that product. And then once that product came in, I installed it, and the cylinder itself was defective and leaked. There was a weld that wasn't welded properly, and there was a little drip leak of water coming out of that. And then when I called and told them about this, they sent me a new one. But then when I got the new one, it had like the wrong monitor on it, and that wouldn't work. And then I would ask them to replace that. I might be getting I did a review over them, so like the story's all on my website. I might be getting a little of it mixed up. But the long story short is, when I asked them to replace that product, basically all I wanted was the product I bought.
Right.
And I wanted it working. And they told me that I would have to go through the manufacturer and through the manufacturer's warranty. And I told them, look, man, that's not the way it works. Like, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, you must deliver on the product you sold me. You should give me this product that works. I paid $800 for it. Then I started reading reviews over the company and realized, man, I'm not the first person this happened to. This happened to a lot of people. But luckily, I have, I don't know if you ever heard of Legal Shield. Simply, it's maybe like legal insurance that you can call and get legal advice. Well, I have Legal Shield. So I called them and told them my whole story. So they wrote a letter, and I sent it certified to that company. When they received the letter, and my request was, I just want the product that I paid for. That's it. They quickly called me back and wanted to fix it. And then I told them, Before this, I told them that I have a YouTube channel specifically over water, and that regardless of the way this turns out, I'm going to do an honest and fair review over your company. Like, we can decide which way it goes right now. Like, if y'all don't want to help me, that's okay. I'm not going to cuss you guys out. I don't care. I don't care about any of that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to tell people exactly my experience with you guys. So if my experience is that y'all decided to help now, then that's what I'll say. And if the experience is that you keep telling me no until I have to have an attorney send you a letter, then that's what I'm going to tell everyone, because that's the truth. And then they finally replaced the item and gave me what I want. I asked them, why did it take this much? And they were still just very rude. And let me say this, it was the freshwatersystems.com. It wasn't the manufacturer. The manufacturer was very helpful. I guess long story short on that too is that manufacturer is great, freshwatersystems.com, horrible business. Don't take your money elsewhere.
To circle back for a bit, one of the things we didn't talk about was whether or not you have a first flush system in place.
I do have a first flush system, and I'm really glad you asked because I want to update it. I like my first flush system. However, I feel like it could be more effective. And this is really hard for me to explain on audio, but the way the earthships catch their water, they have the water flow into like a rock bed, a very small rock bed, maybe 18 inches by 18 inches. And then from there, it falls into another small rock bed that's over the tank. And then there's a pipe connected to the tank. So when the water fills up right over the rocks, it then spills into that pipe and down into the tank. There's like a screen cover over that pipe that doesn't allow any debris to get in there. It's allowing the leaves and the dirt to get trapped in those rocks rather than going into the tank. But with mine, I know that even with my first flush system being effective, you can design a system that is more effective because I do get small buildup of very, very fine like sand particles on the bottom of my tank after months of rain. And I just did a video over how I clean the tanks out. But I really feel like you probably only have to do it once a year, even if you do it at all. It's not a real big deal, but I'm just, I guess, trying to perfect it after looking at it more and more for the past year and a half. And I wanted to build something like that sits on the top of the tank where the water just comes out of the pipe and falls directly onto this rock bed. The only thing I would add is like a slanted screen. So all the water hits the screen and goes through it, but the leaves fall off to the side. Then the rock bed being underneath it, spilling into the second rock bed. If that's maybe really hard to follow on the audio, but just go a little bit more into a first flush system. If people are wondering, well, what is first flush? First flush is where you get to essentially flush out the first water that comes off of your roof or gutters that may have heavy particles, debris, or leaf in. This basically separates that water into either pipes or another container so that doesn't go into your tank. And then you can later release that water and debris and then save your tanks from having all that dirt or debris in there.
Actually, I think what you were saying was actually pretty easy to follow, and that was a great description of first flush. What did you do as far as calculations for figuring out how big your first flush system should be as far as how much water it should capture and allow you to release later? Did you base that off of some formula, or did you just kind of wing it? You don't sound like a wing it kind of guy, so I'm just curious what direction you went with it.
The reason why I forego a lot of research on that is because I knew what I had room to do. And what I had room to do is all I knew I could do. So I didn't have a lot of room vertically. So I've seen people put like one real tall vertical pipe because they have a 2-story house. But this is a 1-story house. So I did 3 short vertical pipes to be able to gain more water. Some people also use a small tank. On this one, I kind of did wing though, because I knew that that's all I could fit. And also I knew that that's something that I could build and that was easily accessible to me. I didn't have another separate tank that would work real good or a way that I thought I knew how to hook it up and make it work. So a lot of the reasons for me building that first flush system is because that's what I felt comfortable doing at the time. And I knew how to do that at the time as well. And I knew that it would work and be effective, and it would be a lot better than not having one. And so after going through all that in my head, maybe it's larger than it needs to be. Maybe it's a little smaller than it needs to be. But either way, it's better to have one than it is to not have one. That's why it looks like the way you see it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no calculations. And quite honestly, I don't know, like if you have 1,000 square foot roof, how many gallons should be first flush. I think a lot of that would depend on, are you around pine trees or are you out in the middle of a field where there's nothing? Or do you keep it clean? So that's a lot of questions to ask yourself. To what kind of first flush do you need to build or design?
Yeah, and that was one of the things when we were looking into setting up our system initially, because ours was being connected to a commercial building that, and I think the area that we were collecting water off of was essentially about a 5,000 square foot area of metal roof. So it was a huge amount of roof collecting a huge amount of rain. But the trouble we ran into was figuring out, like, how big do you really make it? And I think in one instance, it was something like we needed to be able to first flush 5,000 gallons. And then I think there was another one that was like, oh, no, we need to flush 10,000 gallons at first. And it was just, there was so much confusion with that. And I think it sounded like, I mean, what you've done is really said, okay, really, I'm just trying to get the big debris and that stuff out of the way. And then I have this very extensive filtration process that will actually take care of any of the issues that, say, bird poop would introduce.
Yeah, like any of the bacteria that you can't see and stuff, like that's what the filtration's for. And also, let's say something is in your water. So one thing I do when you're pulling from your tank to your filtration, so I believe the most optimal way is to like pull 6 inches or 8 inches below the surface of the water, because a lot of people put like a float on the hose or whatever's drawing the water, so it rests 6 or 8 inches below the surface. However, I have mine sticking inside my tank, I would say 8 inches above the bottom, because I just didn't have a float. I really don't ever get the water that low where I'm even having to suck down the last 8 inches. Basically, all I'm getting at is you don't pull water from the top and you don't pull water from the bottom, because that's where your debris might be. You definitely want to go at least somewhere in the middle, even though I believe the optimum, again, is like 8 inches or 6 inches below the surface. So when you do that too, you also are pulling water that's a lot cleaner. So your filters are working, they don't have to work near as hard when you're sucking up the clean water. So, and that's another thing to do. Even if something's in your tank, just don't suck that up into your filtration.
Yeah. So now you actually, speaking of sucking up the water, you also put on a solar panel and battery and pump system. Can you walk us through that real quick?
Sure. Well, actually, the solar panel is still yet to be installed. It's something that I want to do and that I've talked about doing.
Oh, okay.
Talked about it like a year ago in my video. I just never installed the solar panel. It's partly too because I rarely have to charge the batteries, because the pump doesn't pull that much electricity. You can use that system for hours, and I would say like 4 hours probably at least before you have to charge the battery. But the pump, I have a Remco 5 gallon per minute on demand pump, and in that pump there's a pressure switch designed in there. So not all pumps have that. So pumps that don't have that, you'll have to buy an additional, I believe it's an electrical pressure switch that it can turn your pump on and off at certain pressures. So my pump, if it senses pressure below 40 pounds of pressure, it will turn on until it reaches 60 pounds of pressure, and then it turns off. And this does this automatically. So I would recommend buying a pump with an automatic pressure switch in it. And a lot of them have this. This is an RV pump.
Oh, okay. Clever. Very clever.
I have a little quick connect and disconnect for the battery to the pump. So it's simply like a plug and play. You just plug in the battery. I think it's called a 2-pin connection. I believe that's what it's called. And then there's a little fuse in there. The maximum power that the pump can pull is 15 amps. So I put a 15 amp fuse in it. For any reason, if it pulled more than that, it would just blow the fuse and
not blow up your
nothing
pump.
Would happen.
Yeah. For listeners, where are you pumping water from and to? Like, what is the purpose of the pump within your system?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. So another thing too that I'll add on to this question is that what I don't have that most people would want to have, especially if you're doing this for an entire home, is a pressure tank or a bladder tank. It's also known as. And what this does is, for people that have wells, they'll know what I'm talking about. this puts the water in the tank and holds it under pressure. And so you'll have a stored amount of water that this pump would be pumping it all through your filters and then into this tank. And then this would give you, like, say, 40 gallons of pressurized water. So if you're using your shower, your dishwasher, and your washer at one time, you'll have enough water under pressure to use all those at one time. Because if you are only using your pump, you can only use as much water as that pump can pump on demand, which is about, once it goes through my system, it's probably about 4 gallons a minute. That will then begin to fill up your pressure tank as you use your water. So once you use, let's say, 20 gallons of that water out of your tank, that pump will kick on. It will sense the loss of pressure, and then it will fill that tank back up with 60 pounds of pressure with like 40 gallons in there. So you can use multiple fixtures without losing your water pressure. Okay. But this pump currently, actually, I was worried about if it would have enough muscle to pump it where I wanted it to pump it, but I've had no problem. It pumps through all my filters, and then it goes vertical, like 6 feet, and then it goes all the way through the attic into the garage, and that's where I draw the water from. And then that's where the UV light is plugged into. And that's total piping is probably 50 to 60 feet.
Oh, wow.
Minimum, that pump will push the water all the way to the end there, and I still receive 3.5-4 gallons a minute. And that's on demand. So I don't have a pressure switch. A pressure tank. I just get on demand.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. That's really cool. Going back to what you do with all this water, tell us real quick, like, what is it you're growing? And if somebody wanted to get some of it, how could they do that?
Okay. Yeah. So the kombucha I sell, well, we're both local. You're here in Houston, and I'm actually just right down the road in Sugar Land.
Oh, okay.
And I have a couple locations here in Sugar Land where I sell the kombucha. Just a few retail locations. There's a tea house off of Sweetwater. If anyone knows where Sugar Land is, it's off of 59 and Sweetwater. There's a tea, coffee, tapioca bar they sell the kombucha at. I do a lot of yoga. So our local yoga studio, Awakened Yoga, they sell the kombucha. It's there available for purchase on retail. And then I visit a lot of gyms on the same day and same hour every week. So I build a following at that gym. That's basically it with the kombucha and like all the places. The main place to buy it, if you want to buy it, like by the jug, is to just go to the Awaken Yoga Studios. That's the best place. And those are actually since I go there all the time, a lot of the people are real educated on the product. And so they can really answer a lot of your questions if I'm not there. But yeah, and I also use some of the water from my garden. I also have room to expand the system if I needed more water. But basically, I knew that I would have 3 months of water for my business. So I only need rain at the very least right now every 3 months. But
very cool.
That's what I use the water for.
Very cool. Are you selling the kombucha online yet?
No, very small company. I'm a startup. Less than a year. I've been selling kombucha for less than a year. I've only been selling it probably for 4 months, but I've been working on it for probably at least a year and 4 months. And a lot of it was, number one, the water was giant. That's one of your biggest ingredients. So learning just how to filter and purify all that was a huge step in even being able to make kombucha. And then on top of that, maybe you can tell, I like to do them right.
Yeah.
And I like to do them right the first time. Because if not, you're backpedaling, you're trying to fix errors from the past when you can't work on this moment and building your future.
Going on to your YouTube channel, how do people get in touch with you, and where do they find you on YouTube?
Simply just my name. My YouTube channel is Trenton Kaminski, TrentonKaminski, and it's strictly just over water. I just put up all the videos, all my updates that I do on my Rainwater system, and I plan on leaving it just over water only. I have plans to do like a small gray water system soon where I allow my laundry water to go out to my landscape and water my landscape instead of using city water to water that. But yeah, that's how you can contact me. I also have Facebook and a Twitter. I'm not that active on them. I'm really most active on YouTube. So you can contact me there. Or you can email me if you have questions. I'm really happy to help. I'm happy to see that people are interested in providing for themselves and creating a sustainable life.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I'll definitely put links to all your videos and your YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitter and everything in the show notes for today's episode. And, but man, I sure appreciate you coming on, and you've shared a wealth of knowledge today, and I can't recommend your videos enough. They are really great, and I know it solved a lot of headaches for us on our little project that we were working on. And man, I sure appreciate you coming on today.
No problem at all. I'm really happy that it did help. And that was the main purpose, is to, well, I think it's what Socrates said, learn easy from what others labored hard for.
Mm-hmm. Awesome quote, man. All right. Well, thanks again, dude.
All right. No problem, man.
Mark, it is so great to talk to you again.
Howdy.
I know we've been playing email tag for a few months now, just trying to get this together.
Yeah, well, I've been busy with the book and everything else, so.
Yes, you have. And I'm personally really excited to see this book come out. We're also bringing you on because, of course, you have a specialty as a chemist and understanding the fundamental workings of the universe.
And actually, in preparation for this discussion, I put together a spreadsheet of all the different types of water purification and the types of things that you're trying to remove.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I wasn't expecting you to put that kind of effort into it, but I really appreciate it.
It's something I've been wanting for a while, and this was a real good excuse to put it together.
Oh, so. Very cool. Okay. Let's start with, what is the difference between purification versus sanitation when it comes to drinking water? Or
sure.
Just water in general?
Water in general, sure. Okay, so think of it as sanitizing versus purifying, and that's kind of using the words in the question to answer the question. But what it comes down to is sanitizing is simply killing the biological critters in the water, whereas purification is removing everything, whether it be biological, chemicals, silt, radioactive particles, whatnot, creating pure water as opposed to water that lacks any microbes in it.
Okay.
That's the general definition between the two.
I gotcha.
And from the prepper point of view, especially the way the world is, purification is generally more important than sanitation because there's a lot more things that can contaminate the water than just microbes.
So now, what's the difference between, say, chemical and mechanical?
Okay, mechanical most of the time uses some sort of size exclusion to remove particles, and it's just simple filtration. But the type of filter determines what it's capable of filtering out. Whereas chemical, it's basically, and don't want to scare people with this term, but it's adding poisons to the water to kill the microbes. So,
okay. When some of these would be things like potassium permanganate or chlorine or chloramide, I'm assuming would be
correct.
Some of these things. Why would we use chemical versus, say, because I guess at some point if we use chemical, in most instances, we have to then turn around and take that chemical back out.
It really depends on the quality of the water that you're starting with and what you know it is contaminated with. And most surface water, it's automatically assumed that it is contaminated with bacteria, protozoa, possibly viruses, depending on where you are in the world. So you would add the chemicals to kill that. If there are things like hydrocarbons or chemical warfare chemicals, salt, seawater, adding other chemicals will not take care of that. So adding the chemicals are just to destroy the viruses, the bacterial cysts, the bacteria themselves, the protozoas, things of that nature. But as far as adding these chemicals and then having to remove them, in most cases the chemicals are not dangerous to humans. They're dangerous to the microbes, but used properly at the right dosages, they are safe for human consumption, but you have to follow the directions properly. Of the different types, the ones that would be really considered to be dangerous would be the iodine, like the polar pure type materials.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, you do need a certain amount of iodine in your diet. So there's a balance there. It's like the old saying, the poison is dependent on dosage. Something can be, they're good in small quantities, but if you get too much, you run into problems.
So now, why wouldn't you use mechanical, like a filter, for everything, why is it sometimes that chemical makes more sense than trying to use a mechanical filter for everything?
Okay, for filters, the issue, like I said, they use a size exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so for relatively large microbes like bacteria and protozoas, they're in the zero 0.1 to 0.10 micron size. Just to put things into perspective, kind of, not that anyone can picture this, but 1 micron is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So very, very small. But the filters are capable of removing things down to about, down in that area. Now, certain bacteria form a cyst. Basically, think of it as a bacteria egg,
Okay.
and that is significantly smaller than the bacteria. And in many cases, a number of like the hand pump filters and so forth, most of them can remove them, the cysts, but it depends. Like the straw-based ones, or where you go to Academy and buy the $10 bottle where it has a little activated charcoal thing at the end of a straw inside. That is just designed to make the water taste better. It doesn't remove any of the bacteria, any of the cysts, things like that. When you get down to viruses, which aren't so much a problem in most places in North America, but if you go to other parts of the world, that's when you run into, polio virus and, other measles virus and things like that. But in North America, generally, you're not as concerned about viruses. But the viruses are so incredibly small compared to even the bacteria and the cysts that really there is no mechanical type based filter that will remove them.
Ah, okay.
Now, there are two other types of filters, though. There's what's called a biosand filter, which is basically a column of sand with some charcoal at the top, and you run the bad water through that. Over the course of about 4 weeks at first, what they call a bioslime, this actual algae type mat of material, grows over the surface of the sand. And this particular algae that occurs naturally is actually very good at trapping or breaking down viruses and everything else. In fact, it's also very good at removing a lot of chemicals. Definitely something any prepper worth their salt needs to know is to look up the biosand filters, and they're very easy to make. Basically, it just requires sand and time.
Do they require backflushing like a traditional
Every so
filter?
often. It helps when I don't remember the rule of thumb on it, if it's based on reduced flow or something, but every so often, yeah, they do. They talk about forcing the water back through it. Now, the other form of filtration is the reverse osmosis. And basically what it uses is, instead of like a ceramic filter or some other large pore filter, it uses material similar to Gore-Tex, where droplets of water can't get through. Basically, the only thing that can get through are individual molecules of water. But to force the water through, it either requires a great deal of pressure, which requires energy or force, or there's also ones that use a thing called osmotic pressure, which is a chemistry term, which, if you want to go into it, you can follow it. Basically, you put a concentrated sugar solution on one side of this film and the dirty water on the other side. And nature wants to dilute that sugar water solution, so osmotic force will drive the individual water molecules through that filter into the clean side and dilute that sugar solution. So you get an electrolytic solution, something that has calories and so forth in it. But then you need to stock up on that base syrup. So it's not great for long term. It's good for short term. And they actually make hand-powered pumps, but they're really big and really hard to pump. They look more like the old farm pumps. They have a big long lever and stuff. And like Sportsman's Guide used to sell them, and a few other places used to sell them. I haven't seen them recently, but they are commonly used on lifeboats and things like that because they can take salt water and make pure water out of it.
Oh, okay. You mentioned activated charcoal, and I've done a little bit of research on it, but what actually is activated charcoal versus just run-of-the-mill charcoal?
Marketing, mainly.
I always love to hear that.
Basically, if you look at charcoal under a microscope, you'll see that it's very, very porous and has lots of, like a Swiss cheese or almost like an open cell foam. if you will. As opposed to closed cell, the open cell foam. So you have all these tunnels running through it. So the end result is this charcoal, for a particle, it has a tremendous surface area, a huge surface area for the size of the actual particle, because it's this huge maze on the inside. And then the carbon of the charcoal and the activated charcoal, both, they have a strong affinity to binding to organic molecules. So other molecules that also have carbon in them, they like to just stick to the walls. So the carbon filters, they work good at removing, some fertilizers, assorted chemicals, some not like dissolved salt, like sodium chloride and seawater, but some other larger salts, if you will, some of the permanganates, like we'll talk about in the chemical form, perchlorates, fluorine, things of that nature.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you go to the aquarium section in the PetSmart or Walmart, they sell the activated charcoal. I mean, that's the same sort of thing that's in the water filter. Sometimes, hopefully, the stuff that is actually sold in the water filters has been flushed to clean it up, so there isn't stuff stuck in there from the manufacturing process. But the charcoal left over from your campfire is actually very good. You bust it up into small parts and put it in there, and put a layer of sand on top of it. Ray Mears shows just taking a Coke bottle, the plastic Coke bottles, and putting cutting the bottom off, turning it upside down, putting in some leaves, and then some charcoal and some sand, and then some more, basically making a sandwich and pouring the water through that. And it does a really good job of cleaning stuff up, if an emergency situation.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one before on YouTube. He's got a lot of really neat stuff in general, but well, very cool. Now, you mentioned earlier you have a new book coming out, so tell us all about it.
The Idiot's Guide to Foraging. It's in the Idiot's Guide series, so the competitor to the Dummies books. And what it is, it's 75 plants that are commonly found all across North America. So it's not specific just to Texas or anything like that. The publisher wanted it to cover all of North America. And the publisher actually had kind of an odd request in that it not be geared towards preppers and survivalists. In fact, they wanted it geared towards foodies. And along with the 75 plants, there are 32 fancy smancy, really nice recipes, actually, of things you can do to impress your friends and so forth. Not just boil this, or roast it on a stick, sort of things. We're using goat cheese and things like that. A trip down to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's is required for most of these recipes. That being said, I mean, you can take the boy out of the prepper society, but you can't take the prepper out of the boy, I guess, or something like that. So there's a lot of stuff still snuck in under the radar. So it would definitely be good. And like one of the things they wanted was plants that are easy to find. So not things you have to go deep into the woods on some expedition to find. It's the weeds around your house and in the empty lot down the yard, and even some landscaping plants and things of that nature. Stuff that you don't have to leave your neighborhood to find in most cases. So it's really good for your basic suburban type prepper.
Awesome.
In my opinion, that was my goal with the book is, food security, also making a big deal. You've taken my classes. You've heard me say it's easy to get vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and phytochemicals and all that stuff from wild edible plants. The trick is getting calories. And when it comes right down to it, in any sort of survival situation, calories are what count. And so I tried to get as many calorie-laden plants in there to help the reader find the calories he or she needs.
Oh, great. And I'm looking forward to this book. How can people interested in the book and interested in keeping up with you follow you and keep in touch with you?
Okay, the easiest thing, well, I have the website, the www.foragingtexas.com, foragingtexas.com, and that has all the plants and information and so forth on it. But every day, I'm on Facebook, and if you look up on Facebook, Merriweather Foraging Texas, you'll find me. And like I said, every day I post a new plant that's edible or medicinal or toxic for people to learn about. And then also assorted other plant news and things that are interesting to, I would consider, natural plants, bushcrafter type stuff, prepper type stuff. Basically think of it as secret food security.
Very cool.
I should have renamed I'm going to remember that phrase.
Yes, you should. That's a very good marketing catchphrase for you.
Yeah. I want to mention back on the book, one of the common problems with most wild edible books is they'll have one small picture of the plant, one part of its lifespan. In this book, each plant will have 5 to 7 big, nice color pictures. So you can see what the leaf looks like, what the fruit looks like, what the bark looks like, what the flower looks like, all the different things you need to really, truly identify the plant.
Oh, wow. That must have taken y'all some real time.
Oof. Yeah.
Well, awesome. So when does the book come out?
It will be released April of 2016. So there's still some time yet, but the writing is done now. The page layout is taking place.
Well, very cool. Well, I'm really looking forward to this. And of course, we will put links to all your great stuff in the show notes today, along with a spreadsheet you've made.
Yeah, I built a spreadsheet that shows the different types of contaminants and the different filters, what they will take out, and then just some notes, things you need to keep in mind with regards to each of the types of filters.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
My pleasure.
Don't forget, transcripts, Mark's spreadsheets, notes, and the ability to comment on this episode can be found at www.intherabbithole.com/E142. Be sure to tune in next week. We sit down with resident old coot, Navy Jim. We'll discuss the history of preppers and how preppers are portrayed in the media over the years. And finally, help us keep the lights on. Support the ITRH show and mission by becoming part of the Roving Horde Armada. You can learn more at itrh.net about all the great benefits membership gets you. Things like access to episodes the Sunday night before they air publicly, encrypted forums to connect with like-minded people, access to every episode ever produced by In the Rabbit Hole, including a special one that was never aired, a free copy of the book Owning Your Survival, access to a 1-hour emergency kits for bugging out and bugging in class with special downloads, and that's just to name a few. Again, visit itrh.net for more details now. We're counting on supporting members just like you to help us keep the lights on. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.